Okay, guys, we're here today with Cindi from Sacred Garden. Now, Cindi is an herbalist and has tons of knowledge about herbs and, wild edibles. I mean, lots of different things. But I'll tell you what, we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I am glad to have you here today, Cindi. And if you would, I'd like to just go ahead and introduce yourself, tell a bit about your store or whatever and all you have going on here so people can kind of right up front get an understanding of what you got going on.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cindi Quay, and I am the owner of Cindi's Sacred Garden. I am a Native American traditional herbalist. So I did a talk on Wanda's page on CRAZY DAZES and got to share a little bit about who I am. I am a Menominee Native American. I'm from Upper Wisconsin. I live now in North Carolina in Black Mountain, beautiful Black Mountain. I've been here since 94. And I grew up though in the 60s with traditional parents, grandparents, and learning about medicines and food, edible foods. And I've always had a passion for it. I was gardening with my family. I remember my dad holding me and I'm dropping corn into the holes. So I came from a well-rounded family of farmers, and we always had, as a family of four children and two parents, 1.5 acre farms gardens that we grew our food on. And medicinal herbs have always been very important to me and understanding everything about it. So my store is Cindi's Sacred Garden that I've had open since 2006 as Cindi's Sacred Garden. I had another business prior to that doing the same thing. I just changed my name. I have grown over 76 different herbs, if not more. I'm just thinking like a number that I remember at one time, many moons ago. So I understand the growing of them from when they come out of the ground, when they hibernate in Mother Earth. And I also know how to harvest out in the wild, in the bush, woods, whatever you want to call it, wherever you're from. And so I bring teachings to people of our native plants. I teach herbal schools and community centers, and national parks. I've been teaching for a long time. So I'm happy to be here to talk to your fans, Danny.
Okay. What I'm gathering here is you would actually say that other than just planting a typical garden, along with that, people should be growing different herbs mixed in with the garden just for health benefits, if nothing else.
Yes, and they're all pollinators. Most of them are all pollinators. So you're attracting your bees to pollinate, have more beneficial pollination, and we've got to take care of our pollinators because we all know that if we don't have bees, we don't have food. So it's a beautiful cycle of being part of what Mother Earth provides, the medicines, and many of these plants, Danny, are already growing. You don't even have to plant the seeds. They're in your homestead areas because that medicine is meant for you to utilize. And I've got good stories on that one of showing up on some random person's home, picking something that's growing and letting them know that they've probably had pneumonia in their family for the last couple of years after they say, we haven't seen this plant before. And teaching them how to use the medicines. Mm-hmm. So as a native person, we are not on the top of the totem pole. The plant nation is. So even if you read the Bible, the plants were there first. Right. They were made and given to us to utilize for our food, as edible food and as medicine. I call them medicines. You could call it for your good health. Right. But there's so many that grow and everywhere here in the United States. in each area, there's different herbs by your terrain, whether you're a wetland or whether you're grassland or you're wooded. But the common theme is, I don't know of any place you can't go anywhere where you find plantain or dandelion or mullein. And I could just keep going on and on with that list. And these were here before with my ancestors before the Europeans arrived. And we taught those. And then over the years, certain presidents, I think it was President Roosevelt, was really huge of bringing many native plants here and that are now considered native to us because they've been here long enough in our generations. So they're there for you to utilize. You can make first aid salves. You can use them as poultices. You can make them into teas. You can make tinctures. I mean, there's so much. You can eat them in salads. I mean, think about in the South, poke salad. Danny, I live in the South like you do, right? And
Right.
I was from the North, and we didn't eat poke up there. We didn't eat spring leaves that, you know, you have to boil 5 times because it's toxic to eat them. But I'm going to tell you that the 2 years of the pandemic, and I mean, I really worked with a lot of people, and this is just my own research, guys. It's my own personal stuff here. The people that were eating the mountain folks here that were eating the poke salad from children and continued to do it, like their immune system is super strong, super strong, that they would get mild cases if they even got it. So,
Wow.
you know, things like that are just like amazing for me to see how much our plants are supporting us as human beings.
No, it's kind of amazing. You did mention, I mean, I think it's in Genesis where he's talking about the Lord told Noah when he come off the ark, you know, he said, I've given you all the herbs of the field for, you know, for eating, for your healing, for medicine, for all these different types of things. And you're right. You're 100% right. It's depending on what part of the country you live in, is my understanding. Now, I'm not an herbalist or whatever you want to call it. But my understanding is, with my wild foraging that I've done in the wild and everything, and part of my survival programs and stuff, was that based on the part of the country that you're in, the wild edibles and wild herbs are there for whatever ails that part of the country, whether it's during the cold season or whether it's during the warm season, whether you have poison ivy, whether you have poison sumac, or what, you know, the different types of poisons you have in that area, different insect bites and things like this. There is a wild plant there that is already in place. You just need to know what it is to be able to combat whatever it is you're facing. Now, would I be correct in that, Cindi?
You are correct.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yes. Yes. So like I have this deeper spiritual side to that, is that so all those years, like that golden seal or ginseng was growing, and people came in and harvested it, not to use as medicine, but like for a monetary gain. And so they removed so much of it that it's taken so many different groups like plant savers and people who want to bring it back. We have a forest up here outside of Hendersonville where they're actually growing all golden seal to bring it back, to naturalize it back into the earth. Well, during that time, another plant came. So like for golden seal, it was always there, but no one really paid attention to it. And that was yellow root. And here in these mountains, they call it cocoon root. They had so many different names for it.
Right.
But my grandpa told me that was called poor man's golden seal.
Yes.
And so if you pay attention to what happens as we change and as our health changes and the needs for our health changes, we start noticing plants that we weren't paying attention to, or something new arrives. A rare plant will come back that was totally endangered, totally gone, will arrive, but it'll have different constitutes to it. It'll be changed. And
Well,
it's to meet our needs.
this would be one of the real big benefits to permaculture. When people
Yes.
let their land go back and try to start working back with Mother Earth or nature, or however you want to say it, and they start working back with it, and let the earth do what the earth does. Because I know this from my own personal experience, is when you see specific, now I'm gonna use a term here and don't take it harshly, but people call it weeds. When really lots of weeds are not actually weeds. They're actually medicine in disguise. But when you see lots of these plants, wild edibles or wild herbs on a piece of property, it actually has a lot to say about the soil there. Because when you're looking for specific types of soil to grow whatever in, you first need to look at what you have growing on the ground naturally in the permaculture environment, especially if it's an untouched area and you go in and you say, okay, I need to do some work on my land. I need to clear this spot over here because I think this would make a good spot for this, or this would make a good spot for that. Before you do any assessment on that, you need to assess what's growing there first, because that will tell you what's in that soil, what minerals are available, what type of soil it is, whether there's a bedrock underneath it, whether you have deep topsoil. Whether it's sandy, whether it's alkaline, whether it's acidic. All these type things, the wild edibles tell us everything about the land.
That's beautiful. That's beautifully put in words, because if you're looking for mullein, you wouldn't find it in the swamp. You wouldn't find it in super damp water area. You're going to find it more where there's rocks and drier soil. And that's why you see it on the side of the roads, under power lines. And guys, this is a huge thing. If you got plants growing under any power lines,
oh yeah,
you don't want to harvest those.
Yes,
that energy is like your microwave on steroids, and your plant is right there being nuked. So when you're looking, it's really important to have, if you're getting a new homestead and you don't know anything about plants, find someone in your community that does, so they can walk out and tell you what plants are. And like Danny said, that's going to tell you the soil, the constitute of that soil. You want to work with that. I would think so. I can't imagine that you're going to try to plow a field that's full of bedrock in it, that is going to be poor of nutrients, correct?
Right. Yeah.
You're going to look for plants that you could grow in it, or your native plants that actually help heal the soil. Comfrey is not, wild comfrey came out of Canada and up north of the United States. So wild comfrey, unfortunately, researchers, tested on mice. I said, oh, it has a liver issue. The mice got liver issue. So, and we're talking back in like probably the late 60s, 70s, they started coming out with this research. So people were pulling it out of their yards saying, oh no, don't touch it. But the comfrey was healing the ground.
Yes.
And that was my grandma's favorite plant to use. I can give you an idea of how she used it. And today you would have to be thoughtful about it. But because we're now buying European comfrey, Russian comfrey at nurseries. So the wild comfrey has different constitutes, but is similar. But one of the things that my grandma taught me, Danny, and this was my first love of a plant, was, and I was around elders all the time. And so if an elder had some kind of bleeding going on internally, and the doctors couldn't figure out what it was, my grandma was serving them comfrey tea, because it would bind that bleeder internally.
Right.
And that's an old time medicine, comfrey. There were very few medicines back in the time where people knew what to trust, unless you were taught by the native people on what to trust. And so it's really important that you know, if you want to start working with medicines, with the native plants for medicines, is to talk to someone who really knows identification and to know, and then learn everything about it. Like you said, where is it growing? What environment? What does that soil mean to you? I think that's really important, Danny. It's huge.
It is huge. One thing, you know, with the coming fertilizer shortages that we're going to be facing and all these types of things, that when you was mentioning the comfrey there, you know, comfrey is probably one of our most mineral loaded plants that there is, because the root goes so deep in the ground and it pulls up so many minerals from deep in the soil that we can chop and drop those leaves around our plants, or we can let them dry and crush them in and make fertilizer around our plants out of them. And I do a lot of, I don't talk about this a lot on my YouTube. I talk about it a little bit, but I use the Jadam method on lots of things, where when a plant, and I learned a lot of this from permaculture, and I don't use the term permaculture very often on my channel either, because it brings all the nuts out, and I don't really like to fool with people like that. I just like to talk about growing naturally or whatever. And but when an oak tree grows, as that oak tree grows, the roots pull everything out of the soil that that tree needs, and it stores it in the leaves. And then when those leaves fall off of that tree in the fall and they go back to the earth, as the earth breaks them down, it puts all that stuff that that tree needs back into the soil around the bottom of that tree. And it's a cycle that just repeats itself over and over and over until you get this this thick mat of mulch underneath the tree called leaf mold, which you can go into and makes the best potting soil in the world. It's loaded with micronutrients and all kind of microorganisms. You can make tea out of it for your plants and stuff like that. You can do this with basically every tree, except a few I would think maybe would be the cherry tree or the wild cherry and stuff like this, which it has its own properties for specific things.
I'd watch out with walnut.
And walnut, oh yeah, because of the hormone that the roots give off on the walnut, pulls up, you know, this type of stuff out of the soil. You don't want to do that. Oh, another one would be eucalyptus. Eucalyptus is another one that you don't want to be planting there. It's just like the walnut.
Yes.
It will actually eucalyptus will take your property over. It's like it's very invasive. You know, a lot of people don't realize this stuff, and they go, oh, I love the eucalyptus, I love the walnut. And they go out and they put these things by the gardens and stuff like this. And first news, you know, their plants won't grow, or, you know, nothing will seem to do right. And when man intervenes in nature and puts the wrong things in the wrong places, I mean, this is what's key, is when we put the wrong thing in the wrong place, you know, we don't pay attention a lot of times. And nature is this delicate system that's very, even though it's delicate, it's probably one of the most diverse systems out there that will correct itself. I mean, you don't have to do anything to it. I mean, it literally will take care of itself. Everybody goes, yeah, but I don't understand how the massive oaks and the massive trees grow and all this stuff grows, and nobody ever fertilizes it, but yet it looks beautiful. You know, I mean, and it withstands the drought, it withstands the floods, it withstands all these kind of things. It's because of the biosystem that Mother Earth does in the ground. And then there's in permaculture, there's like these 7 different layers of everything that you go through. And even under the massive oaks and stuff like that, there's these wild herbs that you're talking about. There's wild edibles that's growing underneath the shade or the partial shade of these trees, and they're in their perfect little climate. It's like a microclimate underneath this giant canopy out there, that it doesn't get too hot, it doesn't get cold, it doesn't freeze, it doesn't burn up from, you know, it's protected by the leaf mold that's on the ground. It's being nourished by that. Plus its roots are going down the ground and it's bringing up minerals. It's dropping minerals that the big trees can also feed on. It's a never ending cycle that most people, when they look into the woods, they just see the trees, you know, I mean, and sometimes the old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, is so true, you know. As a Native American, I'm sure you realize that.
Think about all the medicines.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yes, I do not rake my leaves. I will cut I'll cut some if it's too heavy in certain areas. but I always find new worms. Worms
Oh
where they
yeah.
weren't before.
Yes.
You leave that leaf and then you use it on your garden. And you were talking about fertilizers. I've been reading a lot of many different people who are affected by the certain companies' fertilizers this year and has in the past. And they're having to amend it. Mushroom growing, making compost teas, comfrey. You can use mugwort. People don't even,
Yeah.
it's so invasive, mugwort. Mugwort's another great compost that you compost and cover it with a dark plastic, and you've got some nutrients right there that you can use as a fertilizer. So I utilize everything that I can. Of course, I got, I've got a compost pile. I've got a very nice, it's gold. It's
Oh,
gold.
come on.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's my gold. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
So, and everything grows out of it. I've got this
Yeah.
beautiful delicata squash that, just ran right on out, and I'm harvesting again. So, I mean, compost is huge. And then if you look, here's a really important piece about that. If you're in the woods and we call it the duff. So it's that rich soil that's been broken down by all of the broken, leaves and branches. And it has it's alive. It's alive, right?
Yes.
And you see like a rare endangered plant like the lady slipper, which I'm talking more in my area here.
Yeah. We don't have them
And
here.
you go,
yeah.
I'm going to take that. Or you could do bloodroot, or you could do a trillium. Let's just say they all grow in black cohosh, your golden seal, your ginseng, and you take it and you try to take it home with you and plant it. The plant's going to die.
It's gonna die. Yep.
This is going to die.
Yeah.
You're not. I worked with plant savers years ago. Someone's property had over 100 lady slippers on them, and plant savers, and it was actually through the University of Duke, who they wanted to take with them along with the dove. They took 30 plants with them to see if they could get them to survive. They didn't survive. They may have had a small percent, maybe 5%. And they might have got it to grow 1 year and then they died, every single one.
Right.
So when we make changes to what is natural, we are changing the environment of what's growing there. And we're removing what is given to us. Now I understand that some people need to do that. They need to clear the woods to have other areas. Right. And you got an area then that you're going to find out something new is going to grow, and it's probably going to be invasive too, because you just disturbed it. You've got smilax everywhere.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, we got everywhere.
Yeah. So greenbrier is what we call it here. I had to look it up. I mean, it's not something that I've worked with for medicines, and Wanda and I talked about it. I don't know. What do you use the root there for?
Technically here, we don't use the root for anything, but the top of it, when it first comes up, is like wild asparagus. When it's like young and tender,
okay,
it's just like asparagus,
yes.
You know what I mean? And where I learned about it was, I mean, I've raised cattle my whole life. And I used to would walk with my cows when I moved them from property to property. I would just walk with them, kind of like the shepherds used to do with the sheep. I stayed with my cows in the woods, and I would walk and sit down and watch them as they meandered around through the woods and what they ate, what they didn't eat. And I kept noticing they was eating this vine that had briars all over it, where the leaves from it was hanging down. Boy, they just could not get enough of it. And I was like, what in the world is going on here? And so one year I cleared a piece of property, and I didn't know anything about the roots underground. I just chopped everything off and cut everything, pushed everything, and left the roots in the ground. Well, all these little sprouts started coming back up. And boy, when the cows went in there, the first thing they did was eat them all off. I mean, level with the ground. And I was like, okay, there's something to this plant here, Then when I started digging, I said, I'm going to dig one of them up. And I mean, I'm talking about a root system 2 and 3 feet in diameter. The thing weighs hundreds of pounds. I mean, they're just huge. And I was like, oh my word, it's like a big old giant piece of wood with it looked like turmeric or ginger or something like that underground, except maybe like on steroids. It's like 10 times larger. And I was like, man, look at this stuff. And then after I figured out what it was, I found out, I was like, okay, the tops of it's edible. So we would try the tops of it when it first comes up. It's got that asparagus-like taste, you know? And I was like, wow. I said, so there is some things to this, you know? And of course, we still have it, excuse me, we still have it everywhere. You can't get rid of it. I'm just going to tell you, you cannot get rid of it. It's worse. It's very invasive, you know? And the cows love it. So now I got where I just chop it down and let it come back, you know, because the cows love it when it first comes back.
So you're feeding your cows for sure. So what a lovely treat you gifted as a shepherd to your cows. For sure. But you know, we could talk about invasives that are really important. So over the past couple of years, I'm seeing people say, don't plant this, plant that instead. So but I've got to say something about that. Is we should utilize what we can about the invasives since they're here and they're going to just keep growing. And I'm going to talk about one in particular, honeysuckle. Do you have any honeysuckle down?
Okay. Oh, yes. So, the deer love, I use them for food plots for my deer.
Okay, perfect. The deer like it. And our animals do teach us what we can and cannot have. Not on every level. Right. Birds will eat the pokeberries. We don't.
We can't.
I can tell you a story about that one making me very sick by making mud pies and eating them. So some things you cannot eat animals have different digestive systems, but honeysuckle, like as an invasive, I know a lot of areas that have it. So I wanted to talk about it, is that the flower itself, so it would be the Japanese honeysuckle. I don't know how much like our Carolina, which is the red colored one, so it's the yellow one, the yellow flowered.
We have yellow.
That is really it's really excellent medicine. And this is a real simple recipe. I'm just going to tell you guys about this. This is really wonderful. Is you pick those flowers before they completely open. And you know, as a kid, we used to suck them. They're not the same.
Pull the center out of them and get the honey off of them.
Yes. So you can take those flowers and put them into honey. And just, you make sure when you pick anything that it's not wet. I always give everything a day to dry 1 or 2 days before I put it into whether it be olive oil for infusion or honey. And I stick it in. So honeysuckles, you stick in the honey, and come wintertime, when you got swollen glands, red poker throat, your kids have a red poker throat, you pull that jar of honeysuckle honey out. And what it does naturally is it takes inflammation away. Wow. So it's used also in Chinese medicine for people that are always warm to cool them off. So that's exactly what it does. The honey will coat the throat, and the honeysuckle takes away the inflammation. So that's one example. There's so much you can do with honeysuckle, but that is my favorite one. Here's one that I learned to work with, which it's not native plant, is kudzu. Kudzu was brought, right? So I learned actually from a Chinese woman that when you have a lot of phlegm in your lungs, you go pull up one of those roots and you put it into boiling water, and it becomes very mucilaginous, and you drink it. It's really nasty, but it pulls the phlegm out of your body. So it's like you're drinking a plug of mucus to pull the mucus out. And you can eat it. They use kudzu. They grind it down into flour. So there's things you can do with invasives if you have the time and the knowledge behind it. But I really wanted to bring up honeysuckle because it's one of my favorite. I keep them really trimmed back as much as possible so they don't go wild and crazy on me. But that's just a really gentle one that you can work with teas. The honey is, you can put a lot of stuff in honey. A lot of your pollinators, native plants, your wild bee balm. You can do lemon balm. You can do the honeysuckle. I'm trying to have all of the honeys that I've made that all have medicinal properties. Every single one of them, besides the honey, the herb in it, is gently infused and gives that extra healing property.
Now, Well, honeysuckle would be a perennial that keeps coming back year after year after year. And I put a lot of basic
Yeah.
slag around mine because basic slag sweetens the honeysuckle plant up tremendously. And when you do that, if there's a deer in the woods anywhere, he's going to come to that plant you put that basic slag around, to lime it. It just makes it like 10 times sweeter for the animals. And we have to stop also and think about annual versus perennial. Perennial, once you plant a
Yes.
perennial, it's forever. It's what I call the forever garden. There's things that you can plant and you never have to touch them again. In other words, your work is done. You just let them do what they do naturally, and and then just enjoy them. I mean, like rosemary is one of them, I think. Asparagus would be another one. Different things like that. Once you put them in the ground, it's like they just come and go every year. You don't really have to worry about them. And the smilax would be another one. But now then you have your annuals. Now annuals, if we go in and we do too much invasive clearing or cutting at the wrong times and stuff like this, and they never get to seed, then what happens is, this is especially true with lots of our clovers and stuff like this, our red clover, crimson clovers, our white arrow clovers, and our lespedis and different things like this. If we go in and we do too much work too early and we don't let them just come to fruition and do what they do naturally, let them go through the blooming cycle and stuff, then we lose out. Or then we have some plants that are what's called a biennial, which at that point, it's a 2-year cycle in order to get a seed from them. And most people with, like carrots and a lot of your other plants, they get over anxious, and they think, well, I can't wait. And then I want this piece for something else. And they don't just leave a few sitting around somewhere, just to let them sit in the back corner of a bed or whatever. Just leave them, because that's where you're going to get next year's seed, and they're going to acclimate. See, that's most people, I'll just buy some more seeds. Well, acclimation is one of the huge processes to stability of the plant life in an area, because, and I tell people this all the time. They're like, well, I went on such and such a site and I ordered the survival seeds for this or for that, and in a 30-year can and blah, 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 and go on through this problem. And I'm like, dude, take them out of the can, open the can, take them out, plant them, and save the seed from them. First learn how to save the seed, and then save the seed from them.
Right.
Because they're only going to acclimate to your environment. You don't want to get to a life-changing event. We call it an LCE. You don't want to have that happen and then go throw those seeds in the ground. They come up and then they don't do good at all. And you go like, oh no, what happened to my seeds? Well, you didn't acclimate them to your environment. They came from up north, or they came from too far south. I mean, seeds are meant to be acclimated.
That is true. When I first moved on this property 7 years ago, I didn't have a mullein plant. So I didn't have, the mullein is biennial.
Right.
So the first year mullein comes up, it doesn't produce a stalk, doesn't have the yellow flowers. It's just the leaves. A lot of people just dig it out and throw it away. They have no idea that root, number one, is medicine. So like the first year of mullein, that root is, I tincture it up, and that is fantastic for sciatic nerve damage, or if you have painful sciatic in your body. You let it go to, the second year it produces the seeds, where you can harvest the flowers. That I make the ear oil that Wanda loves, the mullein ear oil. And the leaves you can use in tea blends, or you can actually smoke it for lung issues.
Yes.
So you wait for it to go to seed. And then, so the first year, the first one that came was huge and beautiful, and I loved on it every day. I welcomed it. I was so filled with gratitude that it was here for medicine, that I didn't have to go search for it anywhere else. It's like it heard me saying, welcome, please be with me. I want to sit with you. I want this relationship. And Danny, I've been here 7 years, and I'm going to tell you, I have so much mullein, and she just pops up wherever she wants. And I say, welcome. Because there's medicine, and I can help people with that medicine. So those biennials, I don't grow, I'll pick up a couple annuals, but those are to beautify, like a flower pot with an annual in it.
Yes.
Food now, that's different. You know, I'm just talking like flowers. Food is important, obviously, you know, and saving the seeds. But there are so many plants, and you're so right. When it shows up, let it be, let it grow. You still have time the following year to move it to a different location if it didn't thrive or you put it in the wrong spot. But once you have that perennial, you have medicine. You know, you have something, you have pollinator, or you've got medicine. I don't know of too many perennials that you wouldn't utilize,
Yeah, you
or
brought
the pollinators won't utilize.
well, the pollinators would be the big issue. You brought
Yeah.
a point out there. There is a connection between us and plants that most people do not get. You know, they just look at it and go, oh, it's just a plant. It's just a weed, you know, and they got this negative attitude. Well, negativity has a vibe to it that even plants pick up on it. You know what I mean? People pick up on it. Plants pick up on it. It's kind of like, I hate to say this, but I mean, it's kind of like the weapon used to be. You know, we were trained, we would say, you know, my weapon is my friend. How I treat my weapon. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but how I treat my weapon is how my weapon will treat me, and all this kind of stuff. And a plant's basically the same way. Now there are perennials you can just throw out there and they just flourish without you. They don't even need you. You know, they can just do their thing.
Right.
Like, you know, like you're talking like the mullein, it just does it. It just does its thing, you know, but it appreciates it. You know,
Yep.
It appreciates you when you love it back. And I know there is this connection between us and creation, because I mean, even in the scripture, God says in the scriptures, he says, if man did not worship me, that the plants and the rocks would even cry out, you know, because there's a connection between the creator and creation. And we're part of creation, just like the flowers and the plants and everything is. And how we treat creation is how creation is going to treat us. I mean, look at the earth today. Look at all we've done to it. We spray it with chemicals. We do, you know, it doesn't matter. You can go into a piece of property and you can destroy it. I mean, just mutilate it. Give it a year or two, and what happens? The plants just come back, and they just, you know, they just come right on back, and they take care of. They go like, okay, I'm gonna heal the earth back, you know, and they come back and they do their thing, and they can do the same thing for us, you know.
Yeah, as you know, as a Native American, having that relationship with plants is really, really, it's not even like important. It's who we are. It's just part of who we are. It's our DNA. So you don't even think twice about it. And I want to tell you this little story because I really like this to give a more idea of that connection that people have that they don't even know they have. So I teach an herbal school, and I lead out first with ceremony. So I create the sacred space. I want them to clear everything that's going on and just become centered. A lot of times I'm looking for them to find the child within, because the child within will trust than the adult. Yes. And to find that connection, that loving space. And I will take them in an area, and I'll say, all right, y'all be quiet. I want you to spend like 10 minutes by yourself, and you just walk around and wait for that plant to talk to you. And when it does, I want you to sit with it. And I want you to talk to it and ask why it attracted you. Does it have a name? What's its vibration? How does it make you feel? And so this one particular class, this was huge. So I didn't know any of the students. I only met them right at ceremony, and we went into this space. And 4 of 16 in that class, I found at mimosa trees with the beautiful pink flowers.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, wow, you know, we've got 4 that were attracted. So after it was all done, and we all sat down in reflection, and whoever wanted to share could share, one of those 4 spoke up and said that they just lost someone they loved and that this was a really hard class for them to come to, that they weren't going to make. But something told them to come this weekend to class. And mimosa is about grief. It helps the heart. It actually works with the heart. It works as grief medicine to elevate someone in grief. And sure enough, all 4 people had just recently lost someone. And those 4 people found mimosa. Mimosa found them. Excuse me. Let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
Mimosa found
them.
them.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I basically just did was I just easily set them up to find what they needed by giving them the space and a few tools. And that is the plants communicating with us. And that is really important to have that structure. I don't want to call it structure. It's really important just to try it. If you've never, ever tried communicating with a plant, just walk your homestead, find one that calls to you and just sit with it. Just sit with it, because that's how we learn about the medicines that are growing for us. And we learn what we need. They're talking to us. They're communicating to our DNA of what our energies speak. So you can really learn a lot just that way. But that was a really big piece for me, is to see all four of them. And to this day, those 4 still email me, because that was the biggest life event for them to realize that they could go to a plant or a tree or whatever it was in any time in their life to have a connection. Because in this world today, many of us have lost connection to who we are, where we come from.
Yeah, I spent over 11 years in the woods, and I can honestly say that you're 100% correct, because I learned nature. I learned animals. I can actually talk to different animals. Literally, I can sit and speak with those animals, and Wanda has seen me many times. I'll sit out there and I'll have, tell how many owls around me. We'll just sit there and carry on a conversation like you wouldn't believe. And some of them I'll get plumb frustrated with the other ones, and they'll get all upset with each other, and it would be a comedy show before long. And then we turn around, and I've told her before, we'd be sitting over here at the house. I'd tell her, say, way back on that hill back over yonder, there's a snake on the ground over yonder. And she says, well, how do you know that? I said, because the blue jays are telling me. And she says, what? I says, yeah. I said, I don't know if it's poisonous or non-poisonous. I said, well, go get my gun. Let's go back there and see, And we go back there. It might be a big rattlesnake or whatever, a big moccasin or something like that laying on that hill back there. And she's like, I just don't know how you knew that. I said, because when we shut up long enough, and I use that word very strongly, shut up long enough to, like what you was just saying, for that 10-minute space to commune with nature. Nature has a lot to talk to us about. Everybody used to ask me, man, you're always so successful in deer hunting. How is that possible? I've hunted that tract of woods forever, and I never see a deer in there. I said, well, I let the animals tell me where they're at. I said, I just sit up in the tree and be quiet, because I have a Native American background, and I'm like, it's just born into me. And I sat up there in the tree, and I watch everything around me, and I listen intently to every creature in the woods, and each one of them has a story to tell. And as they tell it, they tell you what's going on everywhere. And I can listen. I go, okay, there's a food source right over yonder. And everybody's like, how do you know? I said, because listen to the animals. They're telling me that it's there. There is a wild food source over there. And they're telling everyone else, hey, the food's over here, and then first news, everything's over there. And I said, that's where I need to be hunting at, because that's where the food source is. But we do not stop and take time to do what you just said. And I have a mimosa tree in my backyard that one person almost can't reach around. And that thing's like 40 feet high, and it covers an area of like 50 or 60 feet in diameter. And you talk about that pink bloom in the spring. When it happens, the hummingbirds, I mean, this thing is just gorgeous, you know, and of course, now there's a downside to it. Right now, all the seeds are falling and little mimosa trees, about hundreds of thousands are coming up
Yeah.
everywhere. They'll take the place over. I'm
Yeah.
constantly going around snatching them up out of the ground. And of course, I have lots of subscribers. It's like, oh, please send me one. Those are nitrogen fixers, and the bark can be boiled. And it can be, I mean, there's a ton of things can be used for. I'm not gonna go into all that, but you know,
Oh yeah.
There's that communing side with nature that you talk about. I mean, used to, when I was in the
Yeah.
woods, I could go into a place. I remember this one place I went into. I sat down on this hillside, and as I looked at this running stream in the bottom, I was looking at a hillside across from me. And the longer I sat there and looked at that hillside, I said, wow. I said, I bet people used to live over there. You know, I said, just based on the way the trees were laid out. I kept looking at the way the trees were. I said, oaks and pines and, you know, hickories and stuff like that, they don't grow in correlation with one another like that. I said, it just, something doesn't look right. And I went down across the creek and went up on the other hillside. And as I meandered around, I saw these lilies growing out of the ground. And they were these white, beautiful, I'd never seen a lily like that in my life. And I said, wow. I said, isn't that interesting? So I began to dig where those lilies were, and I began to find clay bricks in the ground.
Yep.
And I said,
Yep.
okay, there was a chimney here at one time. And I dug these bulbs up. I didn't dig them all up. I just got a couple of them. And I put them in my little thing I had with me, and I brought them back home. I still have them to this day. That was over, gosh, that was 30 years ago. And
Wow, that's
when I
beautiful.
when I did the research on them, these lilies only grow in the southern parts of Louisiana in the Mississippi River swamp. And I found this in the north central Mississippi. So somebody way back yonder brought these bulbs from down there up to this old home site that was in the woods and planted them around their fireplace. And well, I probably was a flower bed around the old cabin at that time. And I mean, when I talk about old, I mean, where this cabin stood, there were trees 2 and 3 feet in diameter standing where this cabin was at. So this has been a long time ago. And
Yeah.
I brought these bulbs home, and I did know the name of them. There's some type of lily there. I have pictures of them on my YouTube channel. Occasionally you'll see them pop up, but some type of spider
I'll have to
lily.
go look.
Yeah, it's a type of
So what
spider
color,
lily.
what color is the flowers?
Snow white. Snow white. It looks like little umbrellas opening up all over it. And then I love
Yep.
it. I mean, and it is not invasive. It hasn't moved from right where I put it at. There's just still just a few bulbs out there, but they come back year after year after year. Now, the crazy thing about it is with our climate change, they're coming back at different times of the year. They're not coming back at the same
Yes.
times when they used to. And see, that's another thing people's not thinking about. Our climate and our environment,
Right.
a lot of our wild plants
Yes.
are doing crazy things.
Yes. I mean, I pay attention. I mean, the goldenrod already started flowering, and which means there's a lot of ragweed right now. Usually that doesn't start happening until the end of August,
Yes.
where you start seeing the goldenrod, and goldenrod is the antidote for the ragweed. And I mean, right now that's my love. It's one of my totems. So we were cleaning all the herbs up that I harvested last year to put them up in jars, because I keep them in paper bags, and then we go whatever is left, then we put the left over, so that I know how much I need to harvest this year for our teas or our salves.
Right.
And the goldenrod, I'm like, Rachel, my apprentice, she's like my left leg. She's like, you had 3 bags of goldenrod sitting over there, and they each have like a quarter left. I'm talking the big paper bags you get at the grocery store. She goes, that's a really important plant to you. And I said, absolutely. Number one, because so many people are misinformed. They think the goldenrod is what's giving them the seasonal allergies, the itchy, runny eyes, the runny nose. and they pull it out. And actually that's the bees, like, I don't know about where you're at, where you're goldenrod, but I guarantee it's probably the same. That's the
It is.
bees' last food before they
Yes.
go into, before they hibernate. And it's medicine for us. So by saving the flowers and the leaves, it makes a gentle tea. It's great for kids, adults. And if you got that constant running nose and it's clear, you just drink a couple, 1 or 2 cups of this tea, and instantly, like in 10, 15 minutes, it dries it right up. You may have to have that tea 3 times a day if you're really having a severe allergy. And then if you start having a cold, you would do the same to get the moisture out of your lungs. So, but I notice this every year. I keep, I'm a journaler. I like to write things down, to remember things that change. I've got a lot of, I keep a garden journal, an herb journal, a personal journal. I like to know and be able to reflect. Something is happening and it's shifting. It's completely shifting. So this year, like most of my plants, my food was different than last year. And it is climate. It all has to do with climate.
So where you're at, I mean, we're about 3 weeks different here. I mean, I did the video talking about the leaves turning red here. The maples are already turning red. The black gums are already turning red. And I haven't noticed the berries on the black gum if they've turned black yet or not. I haven't really went out there and looked. But we're 2 to 3 weeks ahead. Are y'all seeing the same thing where you're at?
Yep. 2 to 3 weeks ahead.
Okay, so it's not just us.
So that kind of yeah. Excuse me. So that gives you an indication of weather, how weather is going to change.
Yes.
If you're paying attention. And if you see an Indian chopping lots of wood, be prepared for a cold winter. That's one of our jokes.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of wood being chopped, just know it's going to be a cold winter.
Right.
But yeah, so by paying attention to what the plants are telling us, we already know how to prepare for ourselves. If you are studious and just in communication and connection, Danny, they tell us so much, just like the animals do. You and I, my neighbors call me the modern day Pocahontas, or they're Snow White. I mean, I go in every morning and that's my prayer time, and I feed. I have sunflowers and peanuts. And I've had wild turkeys, ducks. I have tons of bears, guys. Oh my gosh. If I could show you, this morning I was talking to a mama bear. She was probably 250 pounds, laying on the ground, eating the sunflower seed for the birds. And I just said, "Hi, honey, how you doing?" And she knows me. Like, I'm not going to go out and feed her a gourmet meal with my hands, but I'm going to have respect for her.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is I have a turtle, a box turtle that comes every year, one day. It's only one day a year. And when she comes down, because turtles have territories, and comes past me in the morning when I'm in my prayer time, I know that the Mayaples are producing the fruit in my woods. And that is delicious fruit. And most people never get a chance to taste it.
Right.
Because the birds and I know, go down to the Mayaples and go enjoy a few of the fruits. So it's just really a spiral of life and being in balance. But that we are ahead of time. It's cool. We're going to have a cool down this weekend in August.
You are. Yes. Yes.
Like August, it's like, the leaves on my yellow Japanese maple are already turning their colors of brilliant red and orange. It's too early.
It's too early. I mean, this is the crazy thing we're noticing here. Most all of July, and also we're up to, today is the 9th of August. Every morning I wake up, I'm in the deep South now. I'm talking about, I am probably 30 miles from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It's 71 degrees here in the morning when I get up, between 71 and 74 degrees.
That's cool.
That is totally nuts for the morning time. I mean, usually we get up and our temperatures is like 85 with a heat index close to 90 when we get up, and the humidity is 98%. Now, granted, the temperatures, I mentioned this in the video, the high temperatures during the day, you know, they're still reaching the triple digit. I mean, today, get this, today our high was 88 and 89, and our heat index made it to 100. I mean, we've not missed the 100-degree heat index now for, I hadn't looked at my journal, but last time I looked, we were like day 60 something in a row. But as I looked, I go and look at forecasts ahead of time just to see how accurate things are. And as I looked ahead of time into the forecast, all of August is showing us with morning temps around 71 to 70, even some 60s. But then September jumps up. The morning temps drop down into the low 60s, like 64, 65. The day temps jump up into the mid 90s again. And I'm like, what? I said, plants, the cell structure of a plant cannot take the variation. And most people don't get that about plants. That's why we grow them in high tunnels with a shade cloth on them, because, and they do so good in there. It's not that it's this miracle going on in there. It's that they don't have the fluctuation from the morning time temperature to the heat of the day. They stay in more of a constant environment in there, maybe a 5 to 10 degree difference, but not 25 to 30 degrees difference in temperatures, which screws with the cell structure of the plants, and it tricks the plants. The plants think, I just went through winter, and now it's time for me to flower again. And I've got a perfect example. I've got plum. I got pear trees on the hill over there that the new term the weather people are using now is flash drought that we had. Because of the intense radiation that we got from the sun over a 2-week period here a while back when we had a CME come in. It just wasn't a kill shot. It wasn't earth facing, but it was still a bad CME. It hit us with a huge radiation blast, and it burned up all my corn and everything. And the plants, they can't cope with that out in nature. I have an oak tree right beside my house here that's probably 18 inches in diameter. I noticed yesterday it got even. It's dying. It actually got so hot, it's killing that tree. I just took one down, and here's another one going down. I got a friend up in New Hampshire that a lot of his maple trees and stuff like that are beginning to die. And when it rains, he sees soap suds all over the ground and running down the trees, and it's in the creeks everywhere. There's soap suds everywhere. So he's got to where he's actually watching the flight paths ahead of clouds. He goes to an app on his phone, and it shows when the planes begin to fly, and he tracks them where he lives at. From that airport, they come to where he's at, and they sit there for an hour flying circles around him, and then they go back. And then after it rains, he sees all this soap stuff on the ground and stuff like this. He's going like, what are they spraying us with? I mean, what are they putting in the clouds? What are they doing?
Yep.
It's horrible.
You're absolutely right. And it's been going on for a long time. I just think more and more people are in awareness and they're paying attention. I mean, I've got a lot of friends and customers who will say, they were having a really rough day. All the chemtrails, they saw the chemtrails and they knew it. It really messed with them. You know, their health, their energy level, even their psyche, you know, like it pulls them down. It just literally pulls them down. And it's very difficult for many people, just the chemtrails. And then, you know, unfortunately, there's people who say, I don't even know what you're talking about. So it's a really hard conversation to have as a group in total, if we just can't get on board that they've been poisoning us from the air and changing our weather systems.
Yeah, they've been manipulating the weather for quite some time now.
Yeah, I think, Danny, you and I could talk a lot about so many things that are happening environmentally. But I wanted to ask you something. Were there any herbs that you wanted to talk about that I could share about?
Well, our climates are so totally different from where you're at to where I'm at. I don't know how many things we actually have in common that that people don't already know about. Some, I mean, we do have ragweed here. We have, you know, we raise we don't have wild comfrey, but we do raise our own comfrey. We got block 4 and block 15.
Yeah.
We've got, I mean, we have the golden rods. We have all that type stuff. We have the mimosas. I mean, we have all these different things in common here. And we've covered most of that today. That I don't know that, but with winter coming on, our winter this year is going to be like none we've ever seen. We're going to experience things this winter that's not common. Let me put it that way. We're going to be, I'm going to use the word roller coaster. We're going to see snow where snow's not ever been seen before. We're going to see heat where heat's never been seen before during winter. And we may see both of them in the same day, you know, because of what's coming. And with that being said, you're going to see lots of different bronchial infections. Now, with what they're spraying with the barium and the strontium and stuff like this, it's inside these quote unquote mysterious chemtrail things up in the sky. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. The symptoms prove it. You know, people are going to need to know, what can I do if there's no doctors available? You know, what can I do naturally? Now, we talked about the mullein, the breaking loose. We could smoke it, use mucus and things like that in the lungs. We talked about that. And you talked about other things that would, the kudzu, how it could be used, you know, to break up phlegm and stuff like that.
Yep.
You know, now here, personally, Wanda and I, we do use the honey. We use peppermint. I will throw an aspirin in occasionally with it to help relax, you know, something in, you know, as a relaxant in it, but we mainly use lemon, peppermint, honey, and a little bit of, I'm gonna be honest with you, a little bit of whiskey in it. It's not going to hurt anything, as a relaxant, inside it. And then maybe I might throw an aspirin in with it and drink 1 cup of it before I go to bed or something like that. If I'm beginning to feel like a congestion coming on in my chest or something like that. But before we get off here, because we've not been going over an hour, I would like for you to maybe give, I hate to use the word concoction. I mean, that just don't sound proper. But to give a remedy, a home remedy, let's use that word. Let's say a home remedy that you have experience with, that's really good for like a decongestant or for a chest problem if someone has it.
Sure. It depends on what you have growing. So I'm going to give you a couple scenarios that can be done the same way. So if you have thyme growing, save it, dry it. If you have eucalyptus, get the leaves. If you have butterfly root, I'm not talking about the butterfly bush, but I have seen it. I've traveled down to New Orleans. I've seen it alongside, and it is an orange flower, and it usually grows in a lot of farm fields where the soil has been disturbed. That root is called butterfly weed, or butterfly root is what we call it. If you harvest it out and throw it in some of that whiskey, that is going to be the best thing you'll ever use for your lungs for deep congestion. It is a native plant that grows from Wisconsin all the way down Texas. I mean, we're talking, that to me is one of the best medicines. It was used for TB. It was used for pneumonia. If you're in an area with usnea, hit me up, find me. I'll share a video of how to make a simple tincture with that. So that's a natural antibiotic, but a simple decoction can be just, whether it's a culinary herb, you could do sage and thyme. You could gargle with the sage for a sore throat. Mulleine's going to be huge because it pulls the wet, and so does the kudzu. So those are the two big ones right there. And if you're not, I mean, honestly, you got to use whatever is growing on your land, or you go to your medicines. So I would, if I can follow that up, let me see what other plants are growing in your area, and I can just put it in the comments after this post so that people have it. But you can either do a tea, or you can put it into, and I always call it clean alcohol. So like if you're buying vodka, you can get it, the vodka that's from Sweden or anywhere in Europe. That vodka is not having corn put in it that has chemicals in it. So, but you use what you got. A good old shot of moonshine might help.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you know, garlic, turmeric,
Oh yeah.
if you're someone who does that. Pineapple, you love growing
Oh yeah.
pineapple, right?
Yes.
That pulls the excess mucus right out of your lungs.
Yes.
So it's really good to have when you're sick, is to have that pineapple. So those are the simple remedies. If you have a wild black cherry tree, you can go get the bark off of it and boil it down and drink it. That would be for the cough and the lungs. So there's so many different, I don't have just one, Danny, because it would have to be where, you know, what's growing on your property, but there's so
Yes.
much. And so you can do a lot of searches, or, you know, it's just really simple
Okay.
to find
Well,
what will
guys,
work.
we have so enjoyed having Cindi on here with us today, and Cindy's 100% accurate. Me and her could probably sit here for the next 4 hours and talk about everything in the
Yes.
world, you know. But you know, I
Yes.
got to keep this within reason. So, and we'll probably do something again later on. But guys, I want to encourage y'all to go check out her store. Is it Cindi's Sacred Garden? Am I correct about that?
Yep, that is correct. And
Okay.
Wanda's got Wanda's gonna put in a coupon code for anyone who wants to go, so they get 10% off their first order.
Okay. Well, cool. We'll leave a
your
lot of this.
favorites.
We'll leave a lot of this down in the description down below. How y'all can get a hold of Cindi, how you can contact her if you're interested in purchasing some of her herbs and some of her remedies and stuff that she uses for home remedies and things like this. And I'm sure, is it okay to say that they can actually talk to you in person if they need to?
Absolutely. Yeah, they can contact me through the website, my email. It says contact, just hit me and we definitely will strike conversation. Absolutely.
Okay. And guys, look, she's a book full of knowledge. Let me tell you, she's got lots of knowledge. She's definitely the Native American background. It's born and bred into her, just like a lot of it is in me. And I am so excited to have actually come across Cindi and to get to know her. Actually, I have lots of family that live not far from her, and she probably may not even know it. I don't know, but and plus a lot of good friends that live really close to you. And if I could ever get up in that direction, if my heart would ever get where I could travel again, and my health, I sure would like to meet you in person, you know. But if we don't, we can, you
I
know,
would be honored. I
yeah,
would be honored.
we can always do this if we don't. But you know, it is what it is at this moment, and we're going to enjoy every moment that we have. But guys, go check out Cindi's Sacred Garden, and I think that you'll actually truly enjoy it. And then once again, Cindi, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. It has truly been a blessing.
Thank you, Danny. Same to you.
Okay, thank you guys, and we will talk to y'all later.